What's up, pod pals? It's your buddy Adam. You are listening to Podcasting Business School. It's a show where I teach podcasters how to love their podcast like a hobby and build it like a business. If you're a coach, consultant, or service provider, you're looking to learn how to leverage your podcast to build that online business and get more clients, you're in the right spot. Today, we're doing a special podcast audit. It's actually a guest podcast audit. One of my certified podcast growth coaches, Coach Sandra Barker McIntosh, aka Coach Sandy B, is coming down to sit in that coach's seat and coach one of our Podcasting Business School listeners. Great episode on podcast growth. If you're looking to grow your show, then this one is for you. Also, quick heads up, I'm getting ready to run my only certification group of 2025 for that podcast growth coach certification. That's going to be happening very, very soon. The link for signing up for more, getting information and signing up to potentially participate in that is in the show notes. Go and get that if you want to be a certified podcast growth coach in 2025. Again, this will be the only certification group I do in 2025, and I'm very excited to do it. So it was a great program last year. We certified 15 podcast growth coaches, and we're going to do another 15 to 20 here in 2025. All right, pod pals, without any further delay, let's dive into this podcast audit featuring Coach Sandy B.
I am so excited to be talking with you today, Mike, because we get to do a podcast audit together.
Can't beat that. And hi, Sandy. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm glad you are here. So right off the bat, I want to know, what is your goal for this audit? What do you desire to accomplish, and how can we talk about what your needs are? So just share with me, what is your goal?
Well, what I'm hoping to do is sort of gauge where the podcast is at in terms of both quality and reach. It is a fairly niche podcast, and I accept that. It is not one that I think is necessarily open to monetization, but frankly, I'm doing this podcast as a labor of love because I grew up with Gordon Lightfoot's music, and I'm kind of dedicated to keeping it alive in my own small way. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
It did give me a little understanding to kind of what you're looking to accomplish. So have you started I did listen, and you did share with me that you're looking to move into season 4. Have you started season 4 yet?
I've done the recording for the first episode, and I'm going to be editing that today and tomorrow and the next day. So with a little luck, it will be out by Wednesday of this coming week. So we're talking about October 9th.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. So tell me a little bit more about your desire for the podcast. You've been doing it now for this will be your 4th season. Do you go by
That's
season?
correct. That's right. Yeah.
What do you desire to see? If I were to ask you, okay, next year this time, what would you have liked to accomplish with the podcast?
Well, what I'd like to have accomplished is to learn more about his music, to have had several more conversations with people who really care about the music, and to take it to the next step. And what I mean by that, Sandy, is that I'm kind of self-taught when it comes to podcasting. It's an interview-based show.
Yes.
I've made a few mistakes with content that I shouldn't have posted. I learned from those mistakes, and then I went on. I'd like to try to make it more interactive if I can. I'd like to add some features to it that will be things that they're sort of what they call in New Orleans lagniappes, meaning just a little something extra to add to the show. And maybe to get more guests that had particular interactions with Gordon or had personal Gordon before he passed in May of 2023.
Yes, yes. So I had an opportunity to listen to some of your episodes, and I find them pretty fascinating. And one of the questions I have for you is, how do you go about getting the guests for your show?
Well, I go on, there are several Gordon Lightfoot groups on Facebook dedicated to the man's music.
Yes.
And I stumbled across those during COVID. And that was when I wanted to get into podcasting in the first place. We can talk about the genesis of the show a little bit later if you want to. But when I threw out the idea of having a show about Gordon Lightfoot's music, a lot of people step forward and say, "Oh, yes, I'd love to do this. And here's the song I want to talk about." And um, so that is how I find the guests. And then after 3 seasons now, I guess, certain word got around. It was the one thing out there in the podcast world that was dedicated to his music. And so I've had several people just email me saying, "Hey, I've heard the show, love it, would like to talk about this song. When can we get on the air?"
Okay. Okay. And so does that qualify them based on sending you an email and telling you that they have an interest in it and they'd like to be on that's a qualifier to be able to come on the show, or do you look at other things as well?
The only thing that I look at is availability, and is there a song that they are particularly interested in delving into?
Okay.
Because it's one thing to say, for example, I'll use a more contemporary, example. It's one thing for you to say, "Oh yeah, I really like Beyonce's music," and
Mhm.
it doesn't go anywhere from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you could say, "I really love all the single ladies," okay, then we could talk about the production. We could talk about the video. We could talk about how the song got written. We can talk about who the dancers were. We can talk about who produced it, who was playing the instruments, bum, 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 bum. So, what I tell my guests is, okay, we're going to be, getting into this. And if you listen to the past episode, you're going to see the degree to which we get into it. And then I send them an outline, and a few days before we record it, to
Mhm.
say, okay, here are the questions you can expect. You can come up with your own answers beforehand. You can do them on the fly.
Mhm.
But to answer your question, okay, yeah, the qualification is very simple. Okay, you're interested in him. You have a song that you want to talk about, and it can't be a song that I've talked about already. That would
Okay.
be the only other thing.
Makes sense. That makes sense. And so, how is the interaction with your audience? Are you able to do you send out any type of email? What do you do in your process after you put a show out? What is your process for marketing and getting the word out about the episode?
Well, so far, the only thing that I've been able to do is to post on Facebook and occasionally on Instagram.
Okay.
I do occasionally, for a couple of times, I've put a Google form up on Facebook saying, "Hey, what are some features that you would like?" And, I've got somewhere between 14 and 15,000 downloads, and I get 8 responses. So it's a little bit discouraging.
Yeah.
Do I have an email list? No, I don't. I wouldn't be opposed to making one,
Mhm.
but I also don't want to intrude into my listeners' lives.
Okay.
So I'm very conscious of the fact that, I mean, my demographic, let's face it, okay, are people in their 60s and 70s. They're not necessarily the most technologically based, or they're, technologically skilled,
Yeah.
and they have limited time in their day, as we all do.
Mhm.
So I'm certainly not opposed to it. I haven't gotten around to it yet, and I'm a little bit afraid that I would kiss off some of my audience if I had that, and they'd say, "Hey, please stop emailing me."
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. It just helps me understand a little bit more about your listeners and what you believe they would like and not like.
Yeah.
Because when you're looking to, and you're, tell me again, are you looking to definitely grow the podcast, right? So you want more discoverability?
Yeah, I think I would. Like more discoverability, with the understanding that my listenership is only going to go so high,
Yes.
because it's very niche, and I accept that. This is not me doing a podcast on Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
This is not me doing a podcast on Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
This is something that, and particularly because Gordon has passed away,
Yeah.
and so I would love to get it to the maximum. I just don't know what the maximum is.
Okay. And that's, I think, a good thing though, because by listening to your podcast, I found an interest that I wouldn't have necessarily initially thought to listen to your podcast, but I was very intrigued by how much his music has influenced other artists. So,
Mhm.
one of the things I wanted to know, would you be okay with looking to get some of those artists or musicians that have worked with some of those artists that have been influenced by his music? Would that be something that would be interesting to your audience?
I would love it if A, I could find ones that were still alive, and B, if they would take my call.
Okay.
My sense is that you could have somebody who said, "Oh yes, Gordon Lightfoot was a great influence on me," and then, I hear about this and I email them saying, "Hey, would you like to be on the show?" And then crickets.
Crickets, yes.
So of course I'd love to have, someone high profile
Yeah,
who could talk about Gordon's music in a meaningful way. I would absolutely kill for that.
yeah, yeah,
The thing is that they don't know who I am.
yeah,
So, and if they have a certain social status, okay, it's going to get lost in the 10,000 emails they get every hour.
yeah.
So how do I break through? I guess would be my question.
Right, exactly. So I have some thoughts. When you currently, what niche does the podcast sit under? I actually don't remember from looking. What niche do you have it under? What category under Apple are you under now?
Well, it would be under music.
Under
Um,
just
and
music.
it's an interview format,
Yeah,
and the music would be uh, a subcategory of a subcategory.
yeah,
And it would be, country, and then under that would be folk.
yeah,
Although I personally happen to think those two things are completely different, but that's the way Apple
yeah, yeah,
runs.
yeah.
Okay. So it's that category. And part of the reason, Sandy, that it's been so hard is because Lightfoot's music was never categorized itself.
Mm,
The influence was certainly folk,
yeah,
um, but it was what during his life it was a little bit more difficult, to categorize him. I think now people are realizing, okay, we can put him in this box because
mhm,
he's not going to be changing at this point.
yeah, yeah. Good point. So when you look under music, under those areas,
Mhm.
are there any podcasts that you think of you could possibly maybe partner with, even also because you're such an expert in this and you've been doing this to get exposure for your show, maybe guesting on other podcasts that are around music, right? And this specific genre of music where you would bring in that expertise, because this is a great way to get exposure for your show by being on other shows.
Sure.
They're able to promote you and bring to their audience your podcast.
Oh, I have. I've done that on a couple of different shows. Claude calls "How Good It Is,"
Uh-huh.
which takes songs from the rock and roll era and dissects them in about 15, 18 minutes, although it's just Claude talking with pieces of the song sort of interspersed in there.
Yeah.
I've been on Jerry Petito's show
Okay.
at least once to talk. Part of the problem, though, Sandy, is that the people whose work was influenced by Gordon, they don't have podcasts. I can, yeah, I'll give you a few names. There is no, as far as I know, there is no Judy Collins podcast. There is no Dylan podcast that features the man himself.
Yeah.
I did get some modeling of what an interview show should be like from Rob Kelly's Pod Dylan,
Okay.
uh, and we had, we'd been correspondents, but there was never a case of, I should be on your show, you should be on my show.
Mm-hmm.
I would be totally willing to do that if there were other shows about folk music singer songwriters in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And if there are any, I haven't found them.
Yeah, because it's so niched. But I think that with having an opportunity, have you thought of possibly doing some? Because I know one of the things about your show is I get a good piece and then I have to go to FM to get the rest of it. So
Yep.
how has that been working for you?
Well, it's working in the sense that FM does have a listenership.
Yeah.
And so there is a certain amount of monetization that I hope is going to come from that.
Okay.
When I was doing it completely, like releasing complete shows on my own,
Yes.
it wasn't necessarily getting me the kind of swaps or the kind of exposures that you had thought about or
Mhm.
that you are suggesting.
Yeah.
So I've been with FM for about 10 months now,
Okay.
and we're still kind of, so I think the jury's still out
Okay.
on whether or not it's working. What I can tell you is that I got to be on the same network with Rob Kelly for a while.
Yeah.
So I knew that there was going to be a certain amount of exposure that
Mhm.
was going to be there. I'm open to being on other networks also.
Mhm.
I don't know if I have an exclusivity. If I do, obviously I want to honor that.
Yeah.
But um, so I'm so how is that working for me? It is what it is. I mean, I'm not. I don't have any numeric. I don't have any numbers for you on that.
Okay. Okay. And so, some of the things that we look at to think about discoverability, but I don't necessarily feel that that would relate to you because of that partnership that you have, because it's kind of putting you in the place where the people can be. So, I think there's an opportunity within what you're doing with FM to see how you can line up with some other people, some other podcasters that are doing similar things and to get that extra exposure from people that are already in that place, FM, looking for music and podcasts. And so just kind of to niche down in that way. But then also to be able to engage with, you talked about the Facebook group. And
Mhm.
so figuring out ways to interact with that group because they already are fitting the niche, right? And so that exposure and doing something fun with them, like do something that's different from your normal episodes where you're engaging listeners and you're having a conversation maybe around a particular song. It seems like people are really excited to talk about their experience from a song and what it's meant to them personally.
Mhm.
So I
Well,
think that is,
yeah, and that's become part of my interview.
mhm,
They'll be asked them, "What would you have an anecdote about this particular song?"
yeah,
Not just, "Well, I like the melody, or I like the vocal, or I like the instrumentation." Okay, what was a moment in your life when it really became the soundtrack to your life?
yeah,
And that's become part of what I've done.
yeah,
And I think it's been really great. What I would so to follow up on what you're saying,
yeah,
I'd like to have some other sort of interaction
mhm,
with the audience, not talking about that per se, but to
mhm,
talk about some other aspect of it and or their experience with Gordon's music. I
mhm,
already include Did You Ever Meet the Man?
yeah,
Uh, and so I think a lot of the kind of things that you're saying, they're kind of already there in my interview. Now, if you're saying that I should take those out of the script, I'm certainly, willing to do that in order to leverage it with other people. But I've been doing it for 3 years already. So I'm wondering if the ship has sailed on that.
I don't necessarily feel so because those are just people, these are people that you're interviewing. My thought is maybe to engage the audience that's not necessarily going to come on your show, but it's going to tell their friend, like, hey, have you heard this? Have you heard this podcast? To get additional listeners and new people to share the story and to help grow the podcast in that way. So you're engaging with people who are maybe have listened or have heard about it, but now they're like, okay, well, I need to check this out because he's reaching out to us in this different way, especially because you told me about that group that you already have where you told them you were going to create this podcast. So it's like you're coming in now and saying maybe you have a live where they can come and talk with you and be interactive and not necessarily get on the show, right? But just have that buzz and that energy around, yeah, I got to talk about this. Like I'm a fan of Whitney Houston. So if I envision if someone had a show like yours, right, about Whitney Houston, I could talk very specifically about being in eighth grade and how that one moment in time really just made me thought like, wow, this is an exciting time in my life and I can be anything I want to be. I don't necessarily want to come on your show, but I want to engage with you because I hear your podcast and it's so great. And I just, wow, I get an opportunity to talk to you, a lover of the same music I have, to kind of generate that energy and that buzz around it in a totally different way.
I like the idea of having some sort of a live stream, kind of like a talk show. And I don't know how I would do that technologically. Um, and so if you have, some ideas on that, I'd love to hear those. One thing that I had thought about doing was to have a live uh video cast where people around the world would play their
Oh,
favorite Lightfoot song, on their own instruments. And I was warned against that by saying, okay, that is totally breaking people's copyright and you will be sued within an inch of your life if you do it. So I decided to get away from that. It's the reason that I don't have snippets of his
yeah,
actual songs anymore.
yeah.
I mean, I was told that, okay, it's probably not going to get you in trouble. Gordon Firemark and I talked, and he said, probably not something you need to go back and fix, but just don't do it anymore.
Oh, it's
But anyway, so yeah, going forward. So I stopped doing that
yeah.
probably midway through the second season, if not earlier. But I
Mhm.
like the idea of the live aspect of it. And if you can give me any suggestions on how to do it, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah. Well, something as simple of, I know you said you post on Instagram a little bit, but something as simple as, us kind of like how we hear now. Let's say there was a lady that you had on that I listened to, and it was like, yeah, you could tell she just really loved Gordon and his music and was really excited to be on your show. So someone like that where you could actually see this person and maybe some past guests too, right? You bring on because it's a whole different aspect when you're getting on and you refer to that episode, right? Because then I'm gonna want to go listen to that episode. You're not giving me everything because this is a live, but you're just celebrating the fact that, yeah, we're coming to you talking about this specific thing. And you can figure out different ways how it relates to kind of what's occurring now in the world. But to have that visual where the person can see, and so it's like, yeah. And oh, by the way, I want to go listen to that episode because you're going to tease some of that stuff that you've already talked about, season one, season two, season three, but you're just giving them a little flavor. And then you can tease them to say, hey, and in season four, we have more of this. If you like this, if you like this live, you will love to hear.
It's not, I mean, again, I'm loving what you're saying. I
Yeah,
want to do it.
yeah,
It's a question of the technology.
yeah, yeah,
What do I do? Because I've never been on a live
yeah,
internet stream before.
yeah,
And the other thing that I'm a little bit wary of is, okay, the scheduling of it. Suppose I do this and nobody, shows up on the
yeah.
stream,
Here's the thing. We're not so much worried about because with Instagram, what happens is like we can take this recording right now and put it up on Instagram and no one will see it, right? But then
yeah.
it'll be a week or two where you tag it or whatever, and then people start picking up traction. So I'm not so much concerned about that. I just want you to be able to think about, okay, well, this is just another way that I'm reaching people, and it's not going to cost you very much because literally you just click on that live and you go live like we did today. There are other
Oh,
softwares that you can use, like there's a StreamYard where you literally go live once you push it through. Or like I use a software called Riverside. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, where I record my audios. So there are multiple different ways you can literally send the link one or two people you get on you have a conversation, you want it to be fun. It doesn't need to be any stress for you or the people coming because you're doing something fun. You're talking about a subject you could talk about forever, but it's just giving people a visual and a little snippet of the behind the scenes of the podcast and why they should tune in.
Okay. Again, this is something where I'd have to kind of think about what that would look like because I literally don't know how that works. I mean, I literally,
No
if you went on Instagram, if I went on Instagram, I wouldn't know what button to push.
no problem. No
So,
problem.
so it's that aspect of doing that. Now, if I am comfortable with that
Yeah.
and I know how to do that,
Yeah.
then what I could say is, hey, I'm going to be on for 15 minutes, on Sunday at 4 o'clock or something
Yeah.
like that. And I get that out to the Facebook folks and I get this out to the Instagram folks, such
And
as
they'll
they
pop
are.
up. And what
You know,
happens, which is cool with Instagram, is you and I could be talking like this. It sends a message to all the people that you're connected with. Have you ever seen it says, Sandy's on live right now?
nope, never
And
seen
so
that.
it pops up and it says that. And so you can click on and join that live. But definitely letting your community know that you're going to be online, obviously that would be a greater opportunity of people showing up and actually watching it and seeing it. And then you can take it and use it for whatever else you would want to use it for, which is exciting. So everything can be repurposed, right? And so literally I could take this right now and put it on Instagram as a reel and I
Mhm.
know that you and I had conversations. So there's a
Got it.
bunch of ways.
Okay, so yeah, so there is a certain recurring value to it.
Definitely.
It sounds like what you're saying.
Definitely.
Okay, it sounds like something I would like to do. Again, the fear would be, okay, I throw it out there, nobody, and I advertise it or I tell my network, okay, and then for whatever reason, well, I'm too busy, well, I got something else going on, I don't know how to do that, I'm not technologically savvy,
Mhm.
and there's 15 minutes of my life gone.
Yeah.
So is that so what would you say to somebody like me who's a little bit afraid of, just having a complete dud?
Yeah.
And the reason I'm mentioning this
Mhm.
is not because I doubt the efficacy of it
Yeah.
for people who have a basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not it at all. Okay,
Mhm.
but when I've tried other ways to monetize the show, okay,
Mhm.
they've all fallen flat. Okay,
Okay.
people just do not want to pay, okay, to buy tchotchkes or to tune in for this particular interview with somebody else. They just don't want to spend money on my show.
Mhm.
So I guess I don't know if the connection is making sense to you,
Yeah.
but what do you have to say with that?
So I would say that when you're looking where I'm talking you about to get that exposure, I'm not necessarily saying that will monetize, right? I'm just saying
No.
that will be able to have another way for you to reach out to the audience that maybe they heard that you were going to have this, but they haven't seen it. And then knowing that, I don't think it would be a waste of time for you to, and I wouldn't encourage you to spend 15 minutes on a live unless you're having really good conversation and you're
Right.
seeing people coming in, right? Because you will see them in the lives, you'll see people coming in and they're engaging and they're asking questions of you, and that would be a sweet spot. But that video that you've created, that to me is evergreen content because like you already said, you're going to be talking about Gordon. So whether you use it, do you have a website?
I did have one,
Mhm.
and then I think, I might still have it. Hang on one second, Sandy. Let me see if I still have this thing. Yep, I still got it.
Okay, so that's the type things you can have on your website that I'm sure the person that you talk to, they would be grateful and happy to be aligned with you and your message to share their love of what they're doing, right? Obviously, you want to make sure the person's okay with it, but that's a way that you can use these different things to help grow because a lot of times, nowadays people want to see some sort of video in whatever shape or form you put it in. So you can just have another piece of the tool that you are using to get this exposure out there. And it's not going to be too much for you because it's just a simple once we show you how to get online and do it there, it'll be easy enough that you can do. You can be walking, talking about Gordon and how, this song relates to, just it brings me closer to nature. And I think about it, something to just grab their attention. They're like, oh, he put a video out there. And oh,
You
he's
know,
encouraging me to come listen to this episode.
I've got an idea. And as we're sitting here, this is the kind of thing I do, is that, ideas will pop off my head. And George Carlin said it best. I've got a lot of good ideas. Trouble is, most of them suck.
Uh,
But what if I had a timeline of key events in Lightfoot's life? And then I would go online and do a stream or a live, saying, okay, on this day in Lightfoot history, bum ba da dum bum bum. Okay, and then whoever shows up, and whoever doesn't. Does
yeah.
that sound like something that might be feasible?
I totally think so. And the thing is, you already have that built-in group of people from that Facebook group. So that
Yeah.
you wouldn't like if you were in that group and you got that notification that someone was doing a live about a specific moment in Gordon's life, you'd probably want to make sure you check in.
If I was online at the time and available, yes.
But
Yeah, I
even
would.
after, right? Like you would
Excuse me.
look
Yeah.
to see, and a lot of times what happens is you don't catch it when it's live. But then you can literally tell your people, like, hey, put replay. Let me know when you're doing the live. I know some of you are busy working now, but let me know what you think about this. Would you like to have more of this content? This is an easy way where you're not going into their emails weekly, right? But you're just touching point with them in a new way to say, hey, I got something you might want to see. And oh, by the way, here's an episode that goes with it. Here's an episode where we talk specifically about that. So you're always kind of bringing, whether they're old and they heard it 2, 3 years ago and they're like, you know what, I want to listen to that again. Or
Mm-hmm.
they're new and it's like, wow, let me check that out. And what happens is once they go to check something out, something else draws them. So they want to hear that next episode. They want to hear that next thing. And then you have a fan.
Okay, I like it. And I had never thought of that before because that gives you an idea about where I am. I'm basically an audio guy. I'm not a video guy, but it makes sense now.
I got it. And here's the thing. I am definitely an audio girl. I'm right with you. I
Yeah.
listen to podcasts. I don't watch podcasts, but I understand that people want to see things. So I'm giving them a little, but I'm always sending them to go listen to that audio because that's where the meat and potatoes are for you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
this video, and I don't want you to make it very long unless it's good vibes and you're like, I can't cut this off. These people are rocking and rolling, right? You're having good vibes. But then I'd be excited because then I'd tell you, hey, you got 15 minutes. Let's break this up. So you're giving people little snippets and you're driving them back to the audio. So everything
What
take them back to the audio.
what would you say that the starting time should be? Okay, if I don't want to map out 15 minutes, because frankly, I don't want to be sitting there going 15
Yes,
minutes. Okay, well, why isn't
exactly.
anybody talking? So, we talking about 1 minute, 5 minutes?
5 minutes. That's it.
Okay.
And then literally you say, like, if anyone has any other questions, because you might have some people that are asking questions, they're engaging with you, but you already know you set the tone. If you only, I would say only 5 minutes speak, and then you want to kind of reset as you're talking. We can talk about that outside of this, but it's like just resetting to say, okay, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about the life of Gordon, so for people who came in 2 minutes into your 5 minutes, you already know you're giving 5 minutes, but three people came in. So you want to
Yeah.
kind of like reset the room, right? To let them know this is what we're talking about. And this is why I'm so excited to be here to talk to you about it. But that's, I think, a real easy way for you to engage with your listeners, new and old. And it won't be too much skin off your back because you're already talking about it. And I like that idea you talked about because the draw is Gordon. They're coming to hear about Gordon. So the fact that you're telling me about specific memorable moments in his life and you're sharing with me from the knowledge that and then I get to tell you like, yeah, I remember when that happened, so that
Mhm.
interaction is gold.
Then it sounds like my next task is going to be to compile a timeline,
Yes.
if there isn't one out there already.
Yeah.
Back in the days before uh, internet access was really a thing, they had these books, big, thick, biographies of
Yeah.
rock and roll stars where they're saying 1970, January 1st, Sandy B cuts her first record in Motown Records or something. And then July 4th, Sandy B begins a tour, things like that. I'm going to have to see if there is such a timeline. If there isn't, then I'll get some of my fans to say, hey, you got time,
Yeah.
compile one.
Or do you use ChatGPT AI at all?
I've used AI a little bit, and frankly, I mean, in as much as I'm a public school teacher and students, will take advantage of AI to do their homework for them.
Yes.
Um, I'm not I'm not a raving fan of Chat GPT. That said, um, how could I use it to compile what I'm talking about? Are you saying that I could type into Chat GPT, give me a timeline of Gordon Lightfoot's life, and boom, it gives me that?
I would do just that. It can't hurt.
How do I get Chat GPT? Is it an app? Is it a website? I mean,
So I got you. So before we end, because we'll end this and then we'll talk further about it. But so based on what we talked about, I think I would do just like we talked about, get some I want you to go on Instagram and look at some lives. So we'll talk about that. I'll show
okay.
you how to get and do that. And then the timeline and the idea you have about talking about his life to do, I think that would be a great way to kind of introduce and for you to kind of just give them little snippets and then also for you to know that you're doing just something a little different as you go into this next season to just
Yeah.
see as you're looking at FM and seeing how it's going, this is another thing you can gauge to say, okay, how is this podcast really doing? Because I understand the concern of it being very niched and feeling as if have I hit that hit ceiling? But based on me being new, not knowing anything about your podcast and finding like, oh, this is pretty interesting. I like this. I think you have opportunities to bring in some new people and share, this amazing artist. So yeah.
Well, it's funny that you're mentioning Whitney Houston because at one point there was a conflict between those two artists. I don't know if you knew this, okay, but I forget which song it was, but there's a song where she has a line and it says, I don't want to live my life in anyone's shadow.
Yes, if I fail, if I succeed. Look, you got me singing here.
Okay, well, here's the thing. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that melody is the same as Gordon Lightfoot's. I never thought I could feel this way, and I've got to say that I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And Lightfoot sued the writer of that song, not Whitney.
It wasn't,
Okay,
yeah,
but
she didn't write. Yeah.
it was somebody else. He sued the writer of the song because thinking you're taking something from my biggest hit because that was his biggest hit, in 1970. It was If You Could Read My Mind. And if you haven't heard the song, listen to it.
I love that song.
Yeah.
But I'm
Okay.
telling you, I didn't know his name, but I knew the song. So
Right.
that's why it was so awesome. That's why I'm telling you, there is a whole generation of people that
Mm-hmm.
know his music that don't know they know his music.
Well, the upshot, just to close the loop on that particular story, is that his agent, Gordon's agent, said this is going to be, it's going to be a mess. You don't want to do this. And Gordon also said, I don't want to shoot Whitney down
Yeah.
because she's an amazing artist. And so he just said, his lawyer said, look, we want an apology. Okay, just promise me we would never do it again. I don't think he asked for any royalties. Whitney did. So, I think that would, but I thought that was kind of a classy thing. I don't know if the two of them ever met, but I think that would have been kind of fun,
Yeah.
to see that. But yeah, was that The Greatest Love of All?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so.
Amazing. But see, that history alone, Mike, like people need to know that. And that
Yeah,
needs to come from your podcast, from your live, because that to me is fascinating. Like
hmm
as soon as you sang the lyrics, I knew that song. So you
yeah,
see, I think that to me is what makes your podcast interesting because it's giving me that backstory. It's like you hear the song, but now it has more meaning and like, wow, that's pretty cool how we're
yeah.
all connected, right? So thank you so much. I hope this was
My
helpful
pleasure.
to you.
Very much so, yes.
I look forward to talking with you more.
Hi, this is Coach Sandy B from 90 Day Wins. I help midlife creatives and entrepreneurs learn how to launch and grow their podcast with authority, expanding the reach of their message. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your podcast to the next level, I'll provide you with the tools and strategies you need for success. You can learn more about me and what I do on my website, www.90daywins.com.